This time I'm going to be starting with the slipper clutch. So first of all, I'm going to get the spur gear. If you're wondering, I am going to be using a 54 tooth. Now I'm going to get the slipper clutch pads, slide it into the back, and then attach 3 screws to hold it in. Next I'm going to go ahead and put a bearing right in the middle of the spur gear, and then I'm going to move on to this bar. This bar, the little one, goes into the lower hole. Make sure that it's centered, and then I'm going to get the base of the slipper clutch. I'm going to slide that on, push it all the way down, followed by the slipper clutch pad. Make sure that I line it up with those 4 notches. And then I'm going to get the spur gear, put it on top, followed by the next upgrade. This usually is made out of plastic, but this one is aluminum. This is one of those must-have upgrades for the Traxxas 4x4 models. But after that, this collapsible spring, and then finally the 4mm nut. And then I'm going to hold it down with pliers and then tighten it the rest of the way. Once I tighten it all the way down, I'm going to release it 1/2 turn. Next, I'm going to get this piece, slide it onto the tip, and then tighten this grub screw. Now that I'm done with this piece, it's time to focus on the chassis. And as you can tell, there's already a part installed into the chassis. This is a guard for the center drive line. It's only held in with 2 screws. The reason why it's already installed is that the Delta Boy 84 ended up doing a modification. He put Velcro right there. And the reason for that is it keeps rocks from getting into this center part. And believe me guys, you don't want rocks in there. So the first thing I'm going to be doing is attaching the motor mount. But before I do so, a screw gets put in right here. Once that screw is in, I'm going to turn it around and put a bearing in the back. And now it's ready to be attached to the chassis. It's held into the chassis using 3 screws. One here, here, and then when you flip it upside down, one on the bottom. Once the motor mount is installed, I'm going to get the slipper clutch and slide it right through that bearing and push it all the way in. Next, I'm going to move on to the battery tie down. This piece slides in right here and is held in with 2 screws, one there and the other there. Now I'm going to move on to the other side and install this battery post. Alright, after that I can finally go ahead and install the battery tie down. Just slides into position and is held in place with a clip. Now it's time to move on to the Nerf bars. The Nerf bars slide in through the side, just like that, and this little lip goes over the chassis. It's held in place with 2 screws. The same thing goes for the other side. After the Nerf bars, it's time to go ahead and install the servo. The servo faces the chassis in that direction, and it's held in with 4 screws, 2 on bottom and 2 on top. Now it's time I flip it upside down and install the servo arm. And I gotta make sure that it's pointing straight down. It's held in place with a single screw. Once that's taken care of, I need to go ahead and attach the servo arm. And this is also just held in with 1 screw. Alright, so you might notice that I have a 2056 servo in here. I'm supposed to have a 2075, but I don't have one right now, so this 2056 will have to do. Next, I'm going to go ahead and install the waterproof receiver box. So this gets held to the chassis using 2 screws. Now that the bottom part of the box is in there, it's time to install the receiver. I'm going to be using a Fly Sky. Now, I need to feed the antenna right through this hole. Once I pull the antenna through, you'll notice that I have some double-sided tape on the bottom of the receiver. So I'm going to stick that onto the bottom, and now I'm going to get the servo wire and I'm going to feed it right on through that same hole and plug it into channel 1. Once I do that, I'm going to get this antenna tube and slide it over the antenna. And then I'm going to push it into this little hole right here in the chassis. The antenna tube gets held in place with this little grub screw. Now you can see I went ahead and laid the wires into the appropriate slots. I do not have a motor and ESC for this RC yet, so I'm going to go ahead and seal up the receiver box. And I'm going to start with the wire tie down. It's only held in place with 2 screws. Next up, I'm going to go ahead and attach the top part of the waterproof receiver box. Now normally you would put down a rubber seal into this groove, but I don't have that seal, so I'm going to have to skip that step. This is only held in with 2 screws. And now it's finally time to attach the rear assembly, but before I do, I need to point out, you'll notice that there is 2 flat edges on this bar. You'll notice that inside of here, in that pinion gear, there's 2 flat sides. I need to go ahead and match those up and slide this in. Once these two parts are together, I need to install 4 screws, 2 on top and 2 on bottom. One thing that I feel like I should mention is that there is a little lip right here on the rear assembly that needs to slide underneath the chassis. Make sure you do that. Now it's time for the front assembly. Now, before I do this, I'm going to put the center drive line right on there, and then I'm just going to slide the center drive line into the hole in the chassis, and then just like the rear, push it together. Once the front is on, I need to attach 5 screws. There's 4 on top, 2 right here, and 1 on each side, and then on the bottom, I need to go ahead and attach the servo arm to the steering bell cranks. And now the last thing that I can do for the chassis right now is put on the gear cover. This just simply slides into place and it's held on with a single screw. The last thing I should go ahead and mention is I had to put a 3mm nut inside there, and this screw is eventually going to hold the motor mount plate in place. Another thing that I could go ahead and attach is a cable tie down. This holds down the motor wires. All that's left is attaching all 4 of the tires. They just slide into position and is held in place with a 4mm nut. And I am done with this build. Now eventually I am going to have to get a motor and ESC as well as a body for this, and after that I'm going to be doing some upgrades. But for now it's just going to go ahead and remain a roller. But I dubbed this RC Grim. And once again I want to go ahead and thank all the people who donated parts to make this happen. It took me 2 years to get to this state, and I cannot wait till I get this RC up and running.